Hello everyone, I'm Sharon of River Road Knits. Welcome to my teaser trailer for my Casagrande sweater. My goal in these teaser trailer sneak peeks are to get you familiar with the pattern so that you know what to expect if you were to buy the pattern. In this session, we're going to talk about the construction of the sweater. We'll also talk about the techniques that you'll encounter in the sweater. We'll talk about the yarn choice and colors that you might be considering. And then finally, we'll talk about modifications that you might be interested in making. Okay, number one, let's talk about the construction of this sweater. This sweater is done as a bottom up. What that means, if you've never done a bottom up sweater, that means you'll start at the hem, the bottom hem of the body. You'll work up to the join at the underarms. Then you'll start the sleeves. You'll do both sleeves all the way up until the underarms. And then you'll join in the round and you'll continue up to the top of the yoke. Now in this particular pattern, you can see we've got this keyhole detail, so you'll only work in the round for a few inches or something, and then at that point you'll start switching to working it flat. Okay, so the yoke on this is a circular yoke, and that means that you've got decreases spaced evenly around the yoke. One important feature on the sleeves is this lace panel that ends in a box pleat up at the shoulder and also a box pleat down at the cuff. So when we're talking about the construction, as I said, it's a circular yoke, but one of my testers pointed out that the sweater actually fits more like a set-in sleeve, and that's because this box pleat here at the shoulder ends up sitting kind of right at the apex of your shoulder, that's allowing it to hang and drape. So you're not constricted in your arms and your shoulders. So that's something to keep in mind if you normally don't like the way that circular yoke sweaters fit. So now that we've talked about construction, let's talk about some of the techniques that you're going to encounter in this pattern. One thing that's important to me is to provide you with a lot of resources for these techniques that might not be something that you're familiar with or you haven't done them very much. So don't worry, all of these techniques that I'm talking about, I have links in the pattern to my favorite tutorials that you can then watch and implement yourself. So the most striking detail, or the one that might give you the most hesitation at first, is this box pleat. There's 4 box pleats total at the top, one at the top and the bottom of each sleeve. So these box pleats is a way of reducing the fabric. You've got more fabric here in the body of the sleeve, and then all of a sudden at the shoulder we're folding it and we're decreasing these stitches seamlessly. So it's not really a hard technique at all. If you've ever done something like a 3-needle bind off, where you're combining 2 needles worth of stitches together, it's exactly like that. It's very simple. I have a tutorial that I've recorded myself that's specific to this pattern. So when you get to that point in the pattern, you can pull up my tutorial and follow it step by step, and I will tell you exactly where in the pattern you're doing these specific things. So that should help you a lot. Don't let these box pleats scare you at all. Let's see. The other detail that you may not be familiar with is a folded hem. I really, really love folded hems because it makes such a polished finished look here. And again, really, really similar to a 3-needle bind off. It basically is a 3-needle bind off. So that's something that, again, I have tutorial links for you. Very simple. Don't even worry about it at all. And then the last technique that you may not have encountered before is a provisional cast on. You'll use that on the sleeves. And that one it's a little tricky technique, but it's so important. You'll use it in a lot of projects. It's a really great tool to get familiar with. So again, I have links to all of these in the pattern, so you don't need to worry about them. You can just watch your tutorials as you come to them. So let's see, we've talked about the construction, we've talked about the techniques. Let's talk about yarn choice. And before I get into yarn choice, let's take a brief detour into talking about sizing. So this sweater does not have any body shaping. I've designed it to kind of be a loose and flowing garment. So I recommend several inches of positive ease. It kind of contributes to that whole silhouette. It looks at the same time loose and flowy, and then also, very feminine. So this model right now, she's wearing this with 4 inches of positive ease. So you can tell she's got a good amount of ease in at the sides here. So you can choose your size based on that. And I've got a full schematic in the pattern as well as on the Ravelry page, on the Etsy page, wherever you're looking for these, that will help you select which size you're going to make. So now let's talk about the yarn choice. So I made this in a Traveling Yarn Dreamliner. That is a base that is 70% BFL, 20% silk, and 10% cashmere. I love this base. It's really luxurious. It's really nice. It has good drape, which is really important to me in this pattern. It's good to have, I want a good drape so that this box pleat kind of folds so nicely and kind of lays in the way that you want. So that base, again, it's got the silk in it. That's going to help with the drape. The cashmere just gives it a little bit of extra squish. It has just a slight halo to it, and so I think it's really lovely. The nice thing is that I don't think it behaves all that much differently from 100% merino or a sock base. So if you're not looking to use a Dreamliner, you can pick up a sock base and you'll get mostly similar results. If you can find something that has a little bit of a drapier fiber to it, maybe something with a little bit of silk, that would also help you get that drape. But the gauge of this sweater is 24 stitches to 4 inches, which is a little bit on the looser side for a fingering weight. So that's also going to help you get the drape as well. So if you're not looking to use the Dreamliner, Less Traveled Yarn also has their 757 sock base. I've used that for a ton of my projects and I love it. Okay, and last we'll talk about what kind of colors you might be interested in. So you can see I got a pretty heavily speckled base. This is the Cactus Wren colorway. And I think it provides a good amount of interest, and yet this lace detail on the sleeve isn't totally lost. If you wanted, you could use a solid yarn, and that would really make this lace detail stand out. So you're welcome to use a solid yarn, even heavily speckled like I have here. This lace detail is not going to get totally overwhelmed. And of course, if you really wanted, you could go for a heavily variegated, and just, you would have to know that this wouldn't stand out as much, but that may be your personal preference, and that's fine. So now we've talked about construction techniques, sizing, yarn, and the last thing we're going to talk about is modifications that you might be interested in making. Now, the one thing that several of my testers did, or at least a few of them, they opted to add length to the body. The body as written is 12 inches from the underarm to the hem, which I find that this underarm sits a little bit low on the body. So when you hear 12 inches, know that that's starting a little bit lower. But still, it's one that hits kind of at mid-hip, high-hip. For me, it kind of just meets the top of my jeans. So if you would like something with a little bit more length to it, just based on your body type or your style, then you can certainly add length to the body. And then the last modification that I'll talk about is the closure details. Now I have it written with both in the pattern an option for a button closure and a ribbon closure. So those alternates are already written into the pattern. You can choose one or the other. You'll construct the sweater the exact same way regardless. So for the ribbon closure, all you're going to do is feed it through that folded hem. That folded hem creates a channel that the ribbon will sit in. So you can do that, or you can do a button closure, which is just an I-cord here and then a button sewn in the other side. So that's a really simple change that you can make. Again, I have that written into the pattern so you can choose what you want to do when you get there. I have them both on my sample because I've been photographing it, going both back and forth, photographing it either way. So you don't have to do both of them. So the ribbon closure, the button closure, one that I didn't write that you could also feel free to do is an I-cord closure. So instead of the ribbon, if you just want to take the same yarn that you used for the sweater, or a contrasting color yarn, you just knit an I-cord that's long enough to feed through and tie in the back. That's a perfectly acceptable closure as well. I'll tell you about the amount of yarn you can expect to use. I have estimated for the pattern as written using the Dreamliner base that you'll need 3 to 5 skeins. And I have exact yardages or exact estimates in the pattern, so you can, even if you're swapping out a yarn or you're using a different base, you can figure out how many skeins you need to have. But for the Dreamliner yarn, the pattern as written, you'll need 3 skeins for the smaller sizes all the way up to 5 skeins for the larger sizes. That's my estimate. Now that's going to depend on any sort of modifications as well that you make. And in addition, if your gauge is different from mine, you might use more or less yarn just in the length of the body. So keep that in mind as you're buying yarn. All right, thanks so much for sticking with me. I'm so glad that I could do this teaser trailer with you guys. Again, this is something that I've been thinking about doing, planning to do. So if there's anything that you missed that you want me to do, want me to talk about in future teaser trailers, be sure to drop me a note in the comments. You can always reach me on Instagram. I'm at River Road Knits. You can also reach out to me on Ravelry as well. I'll have links in the description for where to buy this Casagrande sweater, as well as links to my other patterns on a variety of platforms where you can buy them. So, thanks so much for sticking with me, and happy knitting. Bye.